It's early days yet in the Amorim era, but this was one of the most encouraging performances we've seen so far. We already know that Liverpool is a cut above the rest of the league so far this season, so let's focus on the positives we saw from Amorim's tactical approach, but also some concerning vulnerabilities that Arne Slot was looking to take advantage of. Slot spotted a clear weakness in the United defensive structure that he ruthlessly looked to take advantage of time and time again. For the most part, Liverpool built up with just the two centre-backs, and United by default had a front three. So, to not waste a man defensively, it was Diallo who tended to be more conservative in the press, while Højlund and Fernandes pushed higher up in the press. Defensively though, Diallo's positioning was still crucial, because he could tuck in deeper into the midfield, looking to cut out a passing lane into a Liverpool man higher up the pitch. But at the same time, Robertson tended to be the deeper of the two fullbacks, so whenever he received, Diallo would be ready on the press. But the left-hand side is not where Liverpool were looking to make inroads. Instead, Slot knew where the holes in United's defensive structure were. Liverpool's midfield three was fluid, effortlessly switching between a single pivot and a double pivot structure, and it was the double pivot setup that caused United's own midfield issues. Defensively, United would have coped a lot better had Diallo and Fernandes been a lot more passive, sitting on the double pivots and allowing Mainoo and Ugarte to remain deeper themselves and compact the space between the lines. But for the most part, this did not happen, meaning that it was up to Mainoo and Ugarte to instead try and tie up McAllister and Gravenberch. Occasionally they did do this well, preventing the pair from turning and forcing Liverpool backwards. The problem? Well, it didn't happen too often. Instead, McAllister and Gravenberch were the ones dictating the game, and they were able to manipulate the pair to create gaps. When McAllister moved deep, his man followed. If Gravenberch fell back or moved wide, his man followed. And all of this served to grow the space between the lines. And this is where things began to become truly ugly for United. Slot didn't just play with the single man Jones between the lines. More often than not, he was joined by the centre forward, Luis Diaz, so that they were operating with a dual 10 system between the lines. And the profile of Liverpool's front four was a nightmare for United, as all four of these men are comfortable playing wide and central, so it would be impossible for the defence to know who would pop up in which position. So how would Ruben Amorim look to cope? As we often see in back three systems, it's up to the wide centre-backs to be extremely aggressive and follow their man deep, and we saw them attempt this. The issue? There were often two men between the lines, as Liverpool effectively had a 4 versus 2 advantage in the midfield. So even if one man was covered by the advancing centre-back, the other could potentially receive. And this is the perfect example. United are pressing with their front three, and Højlund and Diallo have momentarily rotated roles. McAllister is shifting all the way wide, and Ugarte tries to remain touch tight, with Mainoo doing the same on Gravenberch. Diaz drops between the lines and De Ligt looks to close him down, but already we spot the issue. Not only is there a huge gap in the defensive line, Curtis Jones is also still free between the lines, and he receives easily, allowing Liverpool to get up the pitch. Martinez faced a similar issue, but as a more mobile defender, he was more often able to close down Jones. But again, he could be hesitant as well, because he wasn't just leaving a gap in the defense. It would be the perfect gap for Salah to make a diagonal run into, or if Salah was staying wide, Jones or Trent could make that same move. Though more and more as the game went on, we saw him choosing to stay home, particularly when Jones did move to the right, which he often did. But Jones moving wide revealed a second issue, particularly when Fernandes was higher and narrower pressing. As we discussed, it meant that there was major danger for Diallo, as Jones, Salah and Trent formed a deadly rotating triangle, meaning that even if Fernandes was able to recover in time, Liverpool often had an overload there, with their constant movement leading to United defenders being dragged out of position and creating room for runners. And And United's defense actually looked a lot more solid when they weren't pressing, as they settled into a deeper block in a 5-4-1, and they did a great job compacting the space between the lines. But even then, we saw Liverpool really trying to commit to overloading the center to get men between the lines, as they often committed almost the entire team to this central overload to try and achieve just that. So defensively, there's a lot of work for Amorim to do, but offensively on the other hand, there were some definite positives for United, as they too were sniffing out Liverpool's weaknesses. When United were in a back three, Liverpool were initially aggressive in their own press with their front three, and because of their 3 versus 2 advantage in the midfield, McAllister and Jones would be happy to back up the press, knowing that Gravenberch was in reserve, as again, United being underloaded in the midfield was causing them issues, even in possession. So Amorim often began to move Maguire into the midfield, alongside Ugarte when United were in controlled possession, as this would now allow Manu to push higher up the pitch to explore the space between the lines, as they now had a 3 versus 3 in the midfield. But this was particularly dangerous when Fernandes was also dropping into the midfield at the same time as Manu, as now they had the potential to create a temporary 4 versus 3 to help United move up the pitch. But of course, having a centre-back in this position would be extremely risky for the 90 minutes, so it wasn't the most common occurrence. And in fact, United rarely attacked through the centre of the pitch. It was the wide regions where they spotted their opportunity. When Liverpool were pressing man-to-man, we saw United try to play over the press, often with the front three having varying levels of success. But when they did have success, it was either Højlund or a runner down Liverpool's right, where Trent's lack of defensive discipline was a vulnerability. And the United left is where most of the danger came, as Amorim looked to take advantage of Salah's narrow pressing position at times, with the wingbacks being the obvious outlet options. Initially, when Dalot received, we saw Trent looking to back up the press, while the remaining defenders could shift into a back three, with both Fernandes and Højlund pushing out wide in these scenarios. There was the threat of Konate being overloaded out wide, so Slot began to be more conservative in the defensive phase, as Trent would remain deep in the back four so that he tied up Fernandes instead. This meant that Dalot became the consistent outlet option, receiving the chip ball over Salah time and again, and in fact, he had the second most touches on the pitch. And it did look like Liverpool didn't mind this too much, particularly when he was deep, as they may have believed he wouldn't cause too much danger. That was not the case. With Dalot being unchallenged, it presented United the opportunity to either create 2 versus 1s against Trent if Fernandes was moving into the half space, or direct isolations with Dalot against Trent, and both of these situations could be deadly. And we see this in the build-up to the first goal. Liverpool have quite a narrow defensive shape, with the front three on the back three and the midfielders covering the pivots. So Dalot is free to receive and he's isolated against Trent. And we see that Gravenberch had looked to move in with Fernandes into the half space. Dalot is able to get past Trent fairly easily and into a good crossing position. The play breaks down, but eventually leads to United going ahead. But something I thought we would have seen a lot more of was United turning their 3 versus 2 disadvantage in the midfield to a 4 versus 3 advantage by dropping Fernandes and Diallo in when they were in control possession. And as the game progressed, it did begin to happen more often, particularly with Diallo, as Mazraoui was providing the width down the right-hand side. But seeing this more often could have turned the tables on Liverpool's dominant midfield. Overall, the performance was filled with plenty of positives for United. Tactically speaking, I thought the managers, much like the scoreline, were roughly evenly matched, meaning that both earn a 6. But what did you think? Drop your comments down below, as I'll be curious to read them. Great news! I've just launched my newsletter, The Tactical Digest, to give you an even deeper look into the tactical side of the game and so much more. It's completely free through my link down below, so check it out.